We're facilitating others to adopt and move towards economic localization, which means lifestyles which reflect the values of being economically localized, which means becoming more dependent upon where we live, that we consume what we create locally, that we're less dependent upon centralized sources of energy, which are then imported in, or indeed all the things that we consume, which are imported in.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and my guests today are doing phenomenal work in enrolling their whole community into localizing. I'm with Jason Bradford and Brian Weller of the Willits Economic Localization Group, known as WELL. You've done, well, you're ahead of the pack. How do you get everybody lined up and joining the dance?
Yeah, well, that was quite a mystery for me for a long time. And so a lot of what we've been doing is figuring out what has worked, what hasn't worked, and then trying to sort out some general strategies. So we've been cobbling together our history a little bit and coming up with some guidelines perhaps that others can use.
We want to hear what didn't work as well as what does work, because that will tell us what paths to not take, because we'll hit dead ends.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing. See, we're taking this on as an experiment, and like in all lab work, you have some variables and you try some different strategies and you see what works. And this is a learning process, and we don't understand the notion of failure, only the notion of experiment. And this is a useful frame to understand this in.
Very nice. So everything in trial and error is not that means we've learned something, right?
Yeah,
and that's successful.
Right, I made mistakes, but I don't beat myself up about them forever. Because if you do that, you're just gonna get nowhere.
Right, down the hill, not down the tubes.
So
it's a little bit like it's like building a fire. Everyone likes to come to a fire because it's warm and it glows and it's lively and it's all of that. So when we're building this movement here, we're starting with very small things, little kindling, and we're igniting that. And in other words, we're bringing more people to the fire as the fire gets stronger. And this is really what enrollment and outreach is in the community. It's about building something that is so attractive that it becomes irresistible.
That you're drawing people towards you then.
Correct.
That's a different image than going out. So but there's got to be some measure of contact in here.
Yeah,
too.
definitely.
So do we start at the beginnings? Where do we start?
Well, I guess I could explain that when I first arrived, I was very blunt, very honest, and just said exactly what I thought, and that attracted a certain type of people.
And what was blunt and honest about what? I mean, which people?
Well, I would say that I wasn't cautious about the words I used. I just expressed myself as myself about the status of our economy, our dependency on oil, what we're doing to the climate. Overshoot, all that stuff.
Right.
And I was very technical, I was very scientific. Right. But, and that attracted certain people that are open to new...
Already on that wavelength,
yeah, okay.
Yes. Okay.
So what happened is you had enough population here that wanted to hear that, because there's like, finally somebody is saying this stuff in our town and is willing to take some leadership about that.
Okay.
But then when I started going to other parts of town and maybe giving talks to like the Rotary Club, it was just sort of over their head. They didn't quite understand it. So we have to sort of figure out, okay, there are different ways of speaking maybe to different parts of the society of a town, to help them understand where you're coming from. And that's what we're trying to be more strategic about now.
And this introduces the whole concept. It's known popularly now as framing.
Yes.
It's really understanding the mindsets of different layers and different segments of society. How we language, how we frame or create the language so that people can come to this whole concept. You see, if we think about what economic localization is, it's really about rediscovering the beauty and the value of where we live, about locality. And it's like an incredible journey, but it's a journey of going within, rediscovering where we are. We're not going out to somewhere. And this is really what localization is.
Coming home,
it's
actually,
coming home
in a
and rediscovering
new
that,
way.
you know, that when we depend upon where we live for our livelihood, then we'll take care of it. And so much of what's been occurring over the last, probably the last 70, 80, 90 years or so, has been this sort of pioneering spirit out of where we were to discover new things, new lands, and as powerful and as laudable as that is, the consequences of having then to import more and more material, more and more things we need in order to be where we are, that is now unsustainable. We have to rediscover locality.
So in your framing, in the framing to reach, you know, the broader audience, give me a sense of how you, it's not the scientific,
Yeah, well, you have to balance that.
biological, or how do you shift
Well,
it?
people can readily relate to the biological and scientific if you put it in terms they're familiar with, or keep it simple enough that they get the big picture and don't overwhelm them with the details that you find so fascinating.
As
So-
a scientist,
exactly.
because you're what, you're a biologist?
Yes,
No,
I'm a
right.
biologist, yeah.
So yeah, you'd love all the little.
Exactly. So I figured out, you know, if I'm going to have discussion about something, I want to make 3 or 4 points, and then end there, and use terms that people are more familiar with. So when I talk about things, I'll talk about resources, and I'll talk about pollution maybe as the problem, you know, and then just leave it, you know, very simply like that.
Which touches people where they live. I mean,
Right.
people can identify with that.
Yeah, we had a logging
I mean-
industry that is gone because they overtapped that resource. You know, we have
Exactly.
pollution in town. We have a toxic site here in town, and people are becoming more familiar with atmospheric pollution and climate change, and then getting into issues of local security. That, you know, we have roads that can flood or wash out, or bridges that can go out in storms. We have earthquakes, or we have fires, and because we don't have a local sustainable economy, we're cut off. And
So
people
you're
are very
real-
aware of that.
Real vulnerable here. A mudslide just south of you
Yes,
on 101,
right.
and you guys are on your own.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing your Katrina, your version of Katrina.
It is in a
Exactly.
way, and, and this is the thing about vulnerability. You know, vulnerability is a useful concept to understand. Often when groups of people have a shared threat, then that often creates a sense of circling the wagons, coming together to meet that threat. And these are the kinds of threats Jason is referring to. However, there are also internal threats. And the internal threats are to do with our community coherence, how together we are. So the whole social dynamics of how we create economic localization as a balance to the important information that we need to share, the social dynamics are extremely important, and that's something we've been focusing on. What that means is, it means how do we create Team Willets?
Team Willits,
Yeah.
okay.
Because it is like a team, it's like a team effort, you see, and the choir actually is all of us, but not everyone's singing yet.
That's a good point. We are all in this together. We all need to eat together and have water together and shelter
Correct.
together and
Exactly.
conviviality
Right.
as well.
So instead of getting mad at people for not understanding the way I'm presenting it, I say to myself, okay, wait a second. How can I talk to them in a way that they can understand? Because you have to appreciate that different segments of society, different, you know, interest groups, they all have a role, and we need to have them on board. And there are definitely ways, I think, of getting them on board. And it's okay to have somewhat of an us versus them, because if you think of a team has, you know, there's a quarterback, and there are the wide receivers, there's defense.
And we need them all to play the game.
Exactly.
Different roles.
So we appreciate these differences, and we say, you know, we love that you are different. Okay, that's great. That gives you strengths that we don't have. But we have to find a way of working more cohesively, and this is a way of revitalizing. You know, this is a local revitalization of our community and economy. And so when we talk about these threats, we're also talking about how, no, we really appreciate our differences, but you have to use our differences in a more synergistic, cooperative way.
So you're mutually supporting
Exactly.
one
And
another.
passing the ball, you know, this is the thing. You know, that's what
Passing
team is
leadership,
about.
yeah.
You know, we have a saying in Europe which is to do with it's known as it's a sweet little idea known as N+1. If N is the total number of players in your team, when you're working as a team and you're really singing as a team, it's almost as if you've got an extra player on your team.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
it's that extra something.
Which
And-
becomes, there's a unified, this is as if the team were its own new organism with its own
Yeah,
mind, its
yeah.
own will.
And this is what we mean by community spirit. You know,
Yeah.
when you drive through a community and you have a sense, gosh, this place has a juice to it. It has a specialness to it. Or you go to someone's house, or you go to see a group of friends. You see, this role that we're emerging, and it's something we're discovering as we do this. We often refer to our role as one of a midwife. And you think what the role of a midwife is. The midwife is there to, in a sense, educate, in a gentle sense, the mother to make sure she makes the right choices during her, from the period of conception through gestation. And she's going to facilitate the mother in that process and helping with the birth of the child. She's also a watchdog because the mother is vulnerable. So she's looking out for the mother's interest. And also, you know, she's going to be, if you think about what she's doing here, along with, you know, facilitating and educating and being the watchdog, she's going to be doing something else.
Incubating, helping the mother incubate things, bring out the child, and a new birth, a new creation.
And this is the acronym of WIFE: watchdog, incubator, facilitator, educator.
So
and this is really the role that's emerging for Well.
And think about what happens after the birth. Does that midwife own that child?
Of course not. I mean, the
Right.
community here is going to be
Absolutely.
owning that.
All these things that go on.
All the enterprises.
Yeah.
So we don't.
You
Yeah.
can't do it yourself. I mean, one
Exactly.
organization cannot do that. So if
Right.
you're facilitating, when you go to approach, or however you're doing this, you need to tell us who you're
Yeah.
going to.
Right.
If you have sort of a strategic plan of who to go to, or do you wait till they get attracted to you and say, come share with us your ideas? How are you doing
It's a
that
two-way street.
connection here?
Yeah.
It's a two-way street. It's a relationship. You see, this is the thing that's central, and so many new organisations are attempting to create, you know, social change of some sort or another, and that includes most. Often become they become their own place, in the sense they become an organisation which then has to survive and all of that.
Draw resources in
Exactly.
and it has to
And
be
compete with others.
Compete
Right.
with others.
And how can we just energize other groups to broaden their view of what they're about, so that they're also working about localization,
Right.
so we don't have to create yet another organization.
Right.
We're facilitating others to adopt and move towards economic localization, which means lifestyles which reflect the values of being economically localized, which means becoming more dependent upon where we live, that we consume what we create locally, that we're less dependent upon centralized sources of energy, which are then imported in, or indeed all the things that we consume, which are imported in.
Yeah, it's a responsible way to be a public servant, a responsible way to be a business person, a responsible way to be a parent. So, you know, this really ties into very basic needs people have. It enhances your security, it enlivens your community. It allows for a diverse economy so that children growing up here have opportunities.
And can stay
And
here.
can use their ingenuity
That's
in so
it,
many ways.
Because we are exporting our children out because there's not
This is the thing.
interesting industries and work to do
Right.
Yeah.
at home.
Yeah,
Right.
and you see, this is a great lesson from nature. You see, when there's difficulties in a local ecology, the new life, whether it's birds or insects or whatever, if there's difficulties in that ecosystem, they will migrate. See, we found this in this town. Over 90% of our children were leaving
Yes.
because, you know, we've been economically challenged. Why? Because we're relying upon external imported resources and products and materials and services,
Yeah.
and and that includes the large food chains and so on. So by returning to locality, rediscovering where we live, what we're doing is we're re-energizing and making this place more attractive so that our young people will want to stay. And then we recreate civics. We're recreating a civic society here. And it's the very opposite of the trend which is occurring, I would say, globally now.
Well, certainly here in the West, we know, I mean,
Yeah.
and in the rural areas, I
Yeah.
would add.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that a lot of the
Sure.
the migration, if you will, is to the cities and has been in through the whole Industrial Revolution.
Correct.
We're still reaping that.
Yep.
Go back to your enrollment about, the numbers, because I realize there's got to be some, a few people, even if you have good connections, and I think you at Well have done very well at connecting with your civic leaders, your governmental leaders, and your Chamber of Commerce and Business. I mean, how, that at least I know a little bit about, but how did you go about enrolling those folks, and how are you expanding this?
It's a few, really what it takes is a few key people in an organization who love to make those connections. I mean, we have a few people that are they're great glad handers, and they're, yeah, I know so-and-so, I'll go, and they love running around town and shaking hands with people and letting them know what's going on and inviting them to events.
Are they doing formal presentations?
No, this is almost always just personal.
Inviting them to
word of
come
mouth.
to events, so come to Well events?
Yeah.
See, this is the secret, Jeanette. You see, we become very seduced, if you look at how business and corporate life and civic life often operates, we've become seduced to this idea that that marketing requires a lot of technology, a lot of strategy, money,
Yes.
all of that. You see that in all the lobbying that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You see what this is. We're creating an epidemic here.
Epidemics like I sneeze on you,
Yeah.
It's more like it's
word of
coming
mouth.
out of our mouths. It's just talking to each other.
It's
Word of mouth, which is the most
mouth.
effective means of advertising of any kind.
Absolutely.
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean, when I had my little small graphics business, all my clients came word of
Word of
mouth.
mouth.
I didn't have to sell them because somebody else had said this person is worth doing, and
Yeah,
They
that's
did the job
that's
for
how
you.
small businesses do it anyway, right?
sure,
And
recommendations from one another.
Yes, exactly.
So your folks are not doing particularly well. You are doing presentations because you did talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But so people are coming to whatever. What events are they coming to?
Well, what we'll do is we'll often we'll set up an event related to a particular interest group that we want to enroll.
For example.
Like we said, disaster preparedness or emergency. After Katrina hit, we said, here's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Everyone's thinking about what could it happen here.
Right.
So we decided that we were going to have an event related to emergency preparations, and so we basically went out to fire chief, police, sheriff,
Hospital
administrator,
Right.
our city manager, forestry people. We had them on a big panel, and they basically got to explain what they do, how they do it, and we just listened to them for a long time. And then we started talking about the research we had done related to the vulnerabilities we have. So, electricity is needed for our water supply, and we don't have any local renewable electricity. So what if electricity goes out? How does that affect our water? And our emergency services are related. All the vehicles have an oil supply, and we don't have any food in town that's not trucked in. And then they start making the connections also that, we're not really prepared for any long-term problem.
Therefore, in order to be more secure and more responsible as a community, we have to take care of our essentials here.
Yes.
And you see, so that's one example. And we've had other examples. We've had, I think, currently about 18
now.
major speakers that have come in, usually one a month. And we'll get a gathering, typically maybe of 100, maybe 150 people, that kind of number will come, and we'll talk with these experts in their field. And it could be to do with farming, it could be to do with redesigning cities. We've had the eco-city builders from Oakland, Richard Register, come here. We've had all kinds of experts. In fact, we have a local leader in the field, I would say a world leader, a man called John Jevons, who is one of the real founders of local bio-intensive farming. And so, you see, this is the whole thing. What we're really doing here is we're bringing back home the knowledge, the skills, and the information, and the motivation, and the projects to reinvent our town. See, and this is really exciting because it cuts through, and talking about outreach, it cuts through all of the normal political nonsense about people on the right and the left of politics. You see, this appeal, and this is about framing, the appeal of economic localization literally slips through all of those normal ideologies and distinctions, because you think about Republicans and conservatives, they're interested in conservation.
Yes.
actually.
Yes.
They're interested, they're usually most localite in their perspective.
Right.
In other words, they really care. They're interested in succession. They're landowners. They want to pass it on to their children. Their children are leaving.
They look to the past for inspiration, and we're also doing that in a sense, saying we need a more simple life here. Reinvigorate our agriculture.
Yeah.
So
the
maintain
traditional
family
values,
ties, maintain friendships, strengthen local institutions. And it's like, well, yeah, we want that too. But so what we're doing is we're giving them a strategy they hadn't thought of. So it's novel in one sense, but it's also tapping into their needs.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And those needs, if you think about what those needs are, the real needs of community are to work together in a cooperative, interdependent, and effective way. And that's why, you know, we're sitting here in the council chamber of Willets. And the important thing to remember, Janaea, is that when we talk about Willets economic localization, we're talking about Willets economic localization. This is not a
Yes.
separate organization. This is the
The
community
town, the community.
talking to itself in such a way that it can reinvent its future, that is sustainable, effective, and also much more fun. In fact, we had a big festival called Willets Fest as part of our outreach. We had over 2,000 people come.
Woo!
And this was a major daily event, and we talked about these kinds of things. And businesses are now getting involved with what we're doing. The community outreach is becoming more and more effective, and all these different sort of constituencies, the business community, the religious community, the churches, local groups and so on, are looking more and more to each other. They're not looking to an organization called WELL, we're looking to each other to reinvent this extraordinary...
So in that facilitation, you're facilitating the interlinking of others that may not be with you know, the midwife here,
Right.
but with one another to just raise that question. But you
Yeah.
obviously are doing it by having to raise awareness,
Yes.
bring in a new notion here,
Correct.
a new concept, new and old concept, but it's a new one for this community at this time. What I'm hearing is that your speaker events and your day-long whatever
Workshops. Yeah.
workshops, is that what they were? Were those opportunities for people to dialogue?
Yeah.
To
Totally.
hear speakers?
Totally.
Those are the kind of models, I mean, your overarching idea is a different model than most communities have,
Right.
or organizations think about.
So we have this structure of some small administrative structure and sort of dedicated core group of people that put on these events. And also there's this volunteer base of people that show up, and they sometimes help this core group carry on activities. Like, oh, we need volunteers to help us set this up. And those volunteers also will then go out and start projects. And those projects then become their own thing. That
They have their own life.
they have their own life, they have their own
That's right.
administration. And so like Michael Schumann and Marion Fuller, Michael Schumann's the author of Going Local, and Marion Fuller works for the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. They came and did a workshop, and we invited the banker and the Chamber of Commerce people and the city people. Well, the next thing we know, out of the blue, I'm getting this word that our chamber is going to join Bali, the first chamber in the nation.
Right.
And we just started the process by inviting these folks, and the city sponsored it, and then they just take off. And now we'll do follow up. We'll say, hey, we'll go to the chamber and we'll say, hey, let's put on an event together that really solidifies this, and we'll help them do that sort of thing.
See, we don't have to control this process.
Exactly.
I get that. That's really an exciting part of the notion here. But you're learning the keys, and I'm sure that's part of the trial and error of what attracts people.
Yes.
And obviously, your outreach group, or how large is your core group? That's doing this
Maybe it's
work.
like a dozen people or something.
Okay. Are they mostly working sort of as ambassadors, just making connections, as opposed to, as distinct from, say, people starting projects?
No, some people
There's both.
Some people are really good at being this ambassador role. Other people are very good at sort of doing long-term strategies, and other people are really good at doing sort of research. And people are starting to settle out. And so what we have is this group that people are finding their place within it.
Yeah, it's a bit like, it's like the old wagon trains, going from the east to the west. You've got a wagon master, you've got scouts that go out, you've got people that are, in a sense, circling up. You've got people looking to how they, grow their food or share with each other. You've got people that look after, you know, the family and so on. You've got your medical, you've got your shamans. So, you know, we're reinventing what it means to be a tribe here. I mean, because it really is a tribal activity. And we've forgotten what it means to really function in a way which is effective and coherent. You see, what we're pioneering is rediscovering where we live. And that's exciting. And that's an inward journey as much as an outward journey. And, you know, when we talk about the values of well, the values which we believe are absolutely fundamental, they're core to people's self-interest. But they're also community values. You know, so we believe in being responsible as a community. In other words, making sure that we are looking after this place, you know, in a considerate way in terms of our land and so on.
Well, we have these acronyms we use to try to remember stuff so that we can have conversations. So I'll just let people know. I use the acronym RISC, R-I-S-C, responsibility, ingenuity. So we're trying to create a community where people can be creative and find their place and use their talents and keep the talented, enthusiastic people here because they have opportunities. Security. We're trying to create a place that people feel is going to be resilient to threats and short and long term.
Very important word.
Yeah, and the community acts in a sense as the insurance policy for everybody. You know, you don't have necessarily, if you have a strong, vibrant community, you don't necessarily have to buy a bunch of insurance. What you have is you have a support network of neighbors and friends.
You can lean on when you need to.
Exactly.
And that's your sense of security.
Absolutely.
That's true security. I mean, the insurance industry has grown up as a result of people feeling isolated.
Yes.
When you have true community, you are the insurance for each other.
That's the
way that that's the way that this country and every other country will become strong. Because strength is about endurance, and endurance is about resilience, and resilience is about knowing how to be together and with yourself in such a way that you feel secure with each other and you take care of each other. And we have to have that relationship with ourselves and that relationship with our locality, with our environment, with all the species that we co-inhabit with here.
That's the relationship.
That's the relationship.
What an adventure. You know, well, you guys are really, your community is sort of out ahead, and we're watching. And you know, you're carving the new trail, you know, you're the scouts on the front end, and we're watching carefully and excited. We will tune in with you the next, half year and find out what you've learned and what you've changed. Join us for Peak Moment at the next episode. Thanks for watching.